Welcome back to another episode in my journey to beat a Grandmaster. We have the black pieces this time and are playing a 1300 from Mexico. The goal of this speed run is to be playing aggressive attacking chess with the white pieces and very principled chess with the black pieces. So I'm going to be showing you how a classical opening repertoire and classical play can get you to 2000 plus and hopefully even beating a GM. So our opponent's starting with the move knight to c3. Likely they want to go for some Joe Barber London setup. This is extremely popular, so it's going to be helpful to see how you can almost refute this setup with the black pieces. Okay, they play pawn to e3. A little bit of a passive version, not allowing the bishop out to this nice square here. And I think that the most principled way to try and respond to this is to play the move pawn to c5. The point is that we want to try and undermine this center pawn here. White has already blocked their c-pawn, which means they cannot easily defend it with c3. They play captures on c5, and now I think we can just go for something like knight to c6. In case of knight f3, we now control the e5 square, and on top of that, we can play a move like e6 ourselves to just try and collect this pawn here. Although, White's idea is likely something like pawn to b4, and that move could be a little bit annoying. But I don't think you need to worry too much about it. I'm just going to continue with e6 now, making the threat on the c5 pawn, and on pawn to b4 we could always play bishop to d7 to unpin and attack the pawn with our knight. They capture here, which bolsters our center very nicely, and also allows for moves like bishop to a6 in the future, which could restrict the opponent from castling if they play the natural developing move with knight to f3. Okay, I think queen a5 makes a lot of sense here, attacking this pawn on c5, teaming up with the bishop. If we can recollect the pawn whilst also developing our pieces, then I see no reason not to. So now, okay, maybe they can go knight to e5. You have to keep an eye out for your opponent's moves that go into your position. But I don't think that knight to e5 is a huge threat, and they've also allowed us to play this move bishop to a6, which I like quite a bit, because as we mentioned before, without the knight going to e2, our opponent is now unable to castle easily at all. And after the knight jumps in, we can just play a simple defending move with something like rook to c8, or we could even consider playing on the attack with queen takes, or with bishop takes on c5, counterattacking the queen whilst our pawn is under attack. But when you play a move like this, you have to be quite careful. You have to see where's the queen going to go. And I think in this specific case, we should be doing okay because the queen can't go to g4 and make a counterattack against our g7 pawn. So bishop takes on c5 looks like a fairly safe move for me. Let's play it. Bishop takes on c5. They can take the pawn and counterattack our queen, but our queen will just move out of the way, and then the knight will remain hanging, which seems like a bit of a problem, although I now notice they could play the move queen to a4, which would defend the knight and set up some discoveries here. Although it is rather risky keeping your pieces so loose like this. But maybe it's a good idea from white. I kind of missed this move. Although we'll just castle, and the position remains definitely preferable for black. But okay, I mean, they have to find this first, which they do. Good spot from the opponent. Let's castle out of the way. They don't have any knight a4 fork on us, because the queen is now in the way. And as well as that, if this knight ever moves, we now have bishop to b5. That's the only piece defending. And what we probably want to do is start to crash through the center and rip the position open, considering their king is unable to castle. I think d4 is an extremely principled move. Of course, after bishop captures, we're then attacking the knight and attacking the pawn, and then the knight can't really go back to defend, because if it goes this way, if it goes to g4, then we'll just capture it. And then we'll be able to capture the pawn after the queen takes back the knight. So yes, we are a pawn down, but I think it should be clear to everyone that black is definitely the one with the advantage here. Their pieces are a bit all over the place. The queen's on the side. We've completely finished our development, and already white's having to try and desperately give back the pawn. But I'm very happy to accept this, because after the capture, and we take with the bishop, the pawn captures and the queen captures, our queen is now attacking the knight. This knight, and because this bishop is supporting it, capturing this knight is a mate threat. So it looks to me like what probably white's only move was to go for knight to d3. But unfortunately for them, this move does not address the checkmate threat, and we will win the game. So a pretty nice attacking game with black showing that you can, just play in the center, and if your opponent doesn't follow the principles and castle quickly, they can definitely land in big trouble. So 60 move win. Let's take a look at that analysis. Okay, not a bad game. We play at 80 accuracy, couple of mistakes here in the opening. Let's take a look. So they played e3, not going for the Jobava London system. I thought that, e3 was a small mistake, but it's not too bad. c5, we strike in the center, and knight to c6 is actually a mistake, and a fairly sizable one. We should have gone e6 right away, because on pawn to b4 we can now go a5, and they don't have time to play a3 because of this pin here. That makes a lot of sense. And this knight to c6 move was a mistake, I guess, because they actually have time to build up with a3 followed by b4. And if we try and play a4, they have this move knight to a4. That's very nice. And we would be relinquishing the b6 square and at least losing the bishop pair. This pawn will also be really hard for us to win back. In fact, I think I'm familiar with this idea with the black pieces in something very similar called the Janowski. I'll show this right now. So with the black pieces, a line that I've played in the past is called the Janowski, and it's this line where you go like this, and black captures the pawn, white plays a4, knight c6, and then knight to a5, guards the pawn, hangs onto it, and tries to exploit this b3 square. But it's okay for white to play this, because white's up a tempo, and we'll be able to win back the pawn fairly quickly, whereas if we do it with black, it's not so easy. But okay, queen a5, trying to continue to win back the pawn. Engine is giving this rather unnatural move knight to d7 because it wants to go for knight captures or bishop captures, I guess. But this looks very weird because the bishop can't develop because this pawn would hang. But I guess it probably wants e5. That makes a lot more sense as an idea. So Engine wants to take the full center and then capture this pawn here. Quite a nice idea. I went for the more straightforward queen to a5, just going to capture the pawn with the queen. And maybe I overcooked it a little bit with this move bishop to a6, which, wow, it would have allowed pawn to b4. That's pretty bad from me, to be honest. That's supported by the queen. That would guard this pawn here. You should definitely... In fact, that's why queen a5 is just generally bad. Quite surprised I didn't notice that. I guess if we saw that pawn to b4 was a good move, probably should have gone knight to d7 here and taken with the bishop or the knight. Alright though, this transformation was quite good for black because after the queen goes over here, we can just castle out of danger and then white is unable to castle. And after d4, tearing open the white position, it's pretty dangerous. Engine slightly prefers this one because this is an actual fork, whereas the move that I played would have allowed knight to d3, and I guess white stays in the game, although this looks pretty terrible. Like the rooks can come in like here and here. I really don't like this new blue arrow that chess.com's added. I find it a bit annoying, to be honest. I would like to... I don't know if there's an option to get rid of it, if anyone would let me know in the comments, because I feel like that kind of messes with you trying to do analysis without the engine lines, but oh well. Anyway, I thought white could try and hang on like this. Maybe knight to c4 is also playable. Yeah, knight c4 is like a slightly better version, but this is still very awkward for white considering they can't castle, king stuck in the center. Black's just going to bring both their rooks to the d and c file and should still be very, very winning, but my opponent blundered and the game ended immediately. So hopefully that was helpful. A couple of mistakes in the early game there, but ultimately we got the victory, with keeping the king in the center, cutting it off, and going for a checkmating attack. So Principled Chess gets it done once again. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you all in another video. Bye.